welcome everyone. This is our second session on our third and final day, and what I think might be quite a popular one. Quite a few of us thinking about upgrading CICS to 6.1, and we've got Steve Foley here. Normal rules apply. You're all on mute, I'm afraid, so there's no shouting out of questions, but if you pop any questions in the chat, Steve or Jenny or myself will read them out on your behalf, and hopefully we'll get you a timely answer. The session will probably go the hour. If we've got time for questions at the end, great. If not, anything we can always take offline if anyone gets stuck with any big 6.1 upgrade issues. So without further ado, Steve, if you can take it away with upgrading to 6.1, please.
Thanks, Rob. So I'm Steve Foley. I work in the IBM technical sales team for the UK and Ireland, kind of specialise in CICS and some of the other runtime technologies such as ZOS Connect. This presentation is a kind of subset of a workshop I run for customers. Been running 6.1 workshops since June last year. So if we just look at the agenda, the full presentation covers upgrading from as far back as 5.60 as 5.4. We certainly don't have time to do all of that. So what I propose to do in the hour we have is when we get to the changes to externals section, which is normally the bit that takes the most time, I'm only going to cover changes between 5.6 and 6.1. I don't really have time to do any more than that. But the full presentation is on the GSE website. So if you download the presentation from GSE, you'll get all the slides which cover externals back to 5.4. The final section in this is upgrade process, and that's the thing we might run out of time and not be able to cover. So all I'll say about that at the moment is the upgrade process hasn't changed in many releases. So depending when you last upgraded CICS, the process you used then is probably fine for the process you can use now. But depending on how much time we've got, we'll just cover that briefly. Probably the other thing to say is, I know some of you in the call are already upgrading to 6.1. So you're the experts here. So if you've got any thoughts, tips, what's worked well, what's any gotchas, feel free to put them in the chat, or we'll be pausing for questions and maybe have time at the end. I'll be interested to hear from you on your thoughts on upgrading to 6.1. I'm sure everybody would as well. So do a bit on planning. There's subtle changes to ordering installation, which we'll cover. We'll spend most time talking about the changes to SIP parameters, etc. And we'll see how much time we've got left for the process itself and questions. So just first of all on planning, 6.1 came out middle of last year. So I did check recently, and I know the service stream has started flowing. So if you were to order it now and take the latest RSU, there's certainly some service being provided. So probably now's, if you took 6.1 early, probably a good idea to take an RSU at some point before you get to production. Probably the other key date on this is the end of service date for 5.4, which is the end of this year. So depending on what release you're on, you may need to start upgrading fairly quickly. Regardless of what release you're on, we recommend you go to 6.1. There's no real benefit to going to 5.6 rather than 6.1 at this point in time. The migration considerations are the same. So in terms of prereqs and compatibility, the main ones are the top two. 6.1 won't start unless you have a ZEC 12 or higher. The actual prereq for ZOS is 2.3, but 2.3 went end of support late last year, forgetting September-ish. So hopefully everybody's on at least 2.4, but if you're on 2.3 with extended support, you should be okay. The other prereqs here are largely just the releases that are in service. So these DB2 IMS MQ prereqs, those are the minimum levels that are currently in service. The Explorer does have a hard prereq. 5.5.22 is the release which tolerates 6.1, but to actually exploit some of the new function, you'll need 23 or preferably 25, which is the latest. Compilers, those are the supported levels of the compilers. Again, as with any CICS release, that there's no requirement to recompile when you upgrade CICS, but you should certainly be moving to the latest compiler as it's made available. Just look at some other random products and what the prereqs are. If you're running Java, 6.1 supports both Java 8, which has been supported in previous releases, and what's new is support for Java 11. So you have the choice now of whether you run Java 8 or Java 11. Just picks a couple out. WebSphere Liberty. So if you're running WebSphere Liberty and CICS, we'll cover this in a later slide. You do have a bit more flexibility in how you run Liberty in CICS. But the Liberty releases CICS supports are a minimum of 22.003, and in fact you can't be lower than that. Your JVM server won't start in CICS if it's lower than 22.003. And currently the latest version tested and supported is 22.009. So you can have any version of Liberty. So 22.006 is the only other option there. So all three of those are supported. 22.0.0.12 will be available and supported soon. Okay, I think we'll leave that there. So just pause. Any questions just on planning before we talk about ordering and installing?
No question raised.
Thanks, Jenny. So depending on when you last ordered CICS TS, you will see a change when you go to Shop Z to put in your order, in that the custom pack offering, which is a way of taking CICS as a server pack and then using ISPF dialogues to do the install, that has been withdrawn middle of last year. And that's been replaced by what's called a ZOSMF server pack, which, as its name suggests, requires ZOSMF software management to be enabled to install that. So that effectively replaces the old ISPF dialogues with the custom pack with a kind of more modern web-based ZOSMF interface. I would say it's the nice thing. I mean, I've tried it. The nice thing about that is it does allow you to model your installation on your currently installed release. So if you've got a naming convention that you want to maintain, it's quite easy to model the names of your target libraries, etc., based on what you've already standardized on for your current release. So that's one nice thing about the ZOSMF offering. The other way of ordering and installing hasn't changed. That's CBPDO, and I think that's what most customers use. So that hasn't changed. That's still available. So my advice: stick with what you're familiar with. If you've not installed CICS before, or if you're new to the business, the ZOSMF option is probably the better option. So what's in the box, the virtual box? So these are what are called the FMIDs that make up the CICS product. And apart from the release numbers being increased, they're effectively the same FMIDs you'll have seen on your current release, I imagine. Couple of things to point out here is there's two stabilization notices came out with 6.1, one for WS security, which is message security for web services, so web services, and the service flow feature, runtime and modular. So they've both been stabilized. If they're not deprecated, they're not withdrawn. So if you're using either of those features, you can still do so in 6.1. But if you are, probably worth having a chat with your IBM rep to see what the migration path for those two things are going forward. Make sure you install the correct activation module. This is a result of the introduction of VUE, which is a different licensing model for CICS. So those of you who've switched from the traditional MLC licensing to VUE, there's a different activation module. Be sure to use the right one. And everything on the left is delivered via the SMPE install. There's 3 separate downloads if you're using these functions. So CICS Explorer, we'll get on to CICS Explorer, how you install and upgrade the Explorer. There's something new called the CICS Resource Builder, and there's the CICS Build Toolkit, which has been around since roughly 5.3. They are all separate downloads from IBM.com, so they're not delivered via the SMPE product. So in terms of what the kind of first changes you'll encounter when you install 6.1, is there's a couple of new modules supplied in the SDFH LPA library, and they're effectively new versions of the SVC and DFH IRP module. Now these are already being delivered via the service stream to 5.4, 5.5 and 5.6, and the purpose of these modules is to enable effectively the latest release or version of these modules. Both these modules are backwards compatible with all previous CICS releases. But they do require to be installed in the LPA, which either requires an IPL or certainly to stop all CICS and IS interconnectivity workload on a ZeroSL par before you refresh those modules. So the idea here is to provide the latest versions of these modules in advance of the GA date of the next release. So some of you have already seen these modules with 5.6, 5.5 or 5.4. The versions currently provided with 6.1 are actually just dummy modules. When the next release of CICS, which let's just sake of argument say is going to be called 6.2, gets closer, the 6.2 versions of those modules will be supplied via the service stream to 6.1, which would enable you to upgrade them in the LPA before you actually ordered the next release. And the idea is to cut the lead time required to get a new version of CICS in place. Another change you'll notice installation time, and if you were in, I think it was Lewis covered this yesterday, is the requirement to define the category 1 transactions to RACF or ACF2, etc. is no longer required. These transactions should only ever be run by the CICS region user ID, and that's a check CICS can make itself without requiring a call to the security manager. So that call is no longer made, and CICS will make the check internally. So where you have defined profiles for the Category 1 transactions, after you're fully migrated to 6.1, you'll be able to remove those profiles. And I think finally on installation, this only applies if you're loading some of the optional CICS modules into the LPA. There's about half a dozen CICS modules that must be in the LPA, but there's several dozen which are optional. Some customers do that if they've got white space in LPA, and they can move some of these CICS modules into LPA and then get some virtual storage constraint relief as a result across all their CICS regions. CICS provides a couple of samples which denote which modules are eligible to be in the LPA, and these two modules here, DFHEI tab, DFHEI TBS, which are the API and SPI tables used by the CICS translator, those are no longer eligible to be in the LPA as a result of changes that were made back in 5.5 to the translator. However, I don't think they were picked up on at the time, but it's a lot clearer now, and those two modules have been removed from the samples that allow you to copy modules into the LPA. Okay, I'll just pause for a second in case there's any questions on installation.
No question raised yet.
Thanks, Jenny. So we'll move now into changes to externals that you'll come across during the installation process. So we're going to talk about the set parameters, we're going to talk about feature toggles, and we're going to talk about resource definitions. But as I said at the beginning, we don't have time to cover all the changes going back to 5.4, so we'll only cover here what's changed between the time 5.6 went GA and 6.1. So some of these changes you'll see have been retrofitted backwards, but these are all changes that occurred between in the last 2 years, effectively. So the first one is around how TLS is configured in a region, and again, those of you who were in Lewis's security presentation will have heard how CICS now supports TLS 1.3. So I'm not going to go into that, but what we'll cover is how this support manifests itself and changes to the set parameters. So the first one to point out is that the old encryption set parameter, which has been deprecated for a number of releases, has now actually been removed. So nobody should be using that encryption set parameter, but if for any reason you are, it is absolutely, most definitely now removed at 6.1. That encryption parameter was replaced by the min TLS level set parameter, which defines a minimum level of TLS the CICS region is prepared to support. So what has changed there is in 6.1, the option for TLS 1.0 has been removed. The default remains at TLS 1.2, and the option to specify TLS 1.3 has been added. Now, as Lewis explained, we're not necessarily recommending all customers immediately go to TLS 1.3. There are migration considerations, which is why the default remains at 1.2. However, a new set parameter has been introduced, max TLS level, which enables you to kind of specify if you're really not ready for TLS 1.3, you can also specify max TLS level 1.2, which will ensure you don't accidentally accept connections that you're not configured to use elsewhere. So what else do I want to say here? Something that caught me out was the we'll get onto ciphers in a later slide as well. The old way of specifying ciphers, using 2-digit codes, is deprecated in favour of a ciphers XML file, and CICS does provide some samples of those. It was providing a sample called strongciphers.xml. That sample has been removed, which, despite its name, did not actually contain strong ciphers. It contained a bunch of old ciphers, and the name strong ciphers related to the old encryption parameter and was consistent with setting encryption equals strong, which many years ago would have been strong encryption, but for quite a while now is not strong. So if you happen to be using that strong ciphers sample, that is removed as well. Okay, so that's TLS. So the next new parameter is resource overrides. Resource overrides is a kind of separate topic of its own. It's new capability that came in maybe 18 months ago. It certainly was delivered in the 5.6 timeframe via service, and is a way of overriding resource definitions at install time. The kind of reasoning behind this new capability is to support having a single resource definition be migrated through development test into production without having to be changed. Apart from the resources that need to be changed as a result of moving environment, and probably the best example is a file definition where the dataset name needs to change as you move through to production. So this new capability allows those types of resources to be overridden at install time via a file in YAML format. And the way of specifying the name of that file is via this zip parameter. If you're already using this capability at 5.6, you would have been using a feature toggle com.ibm.cics.resourceoverrides.file. So that feature toggle is removed at 6.1 in favour of a zip parameter. Another new zip parameter at 6.1 is the shared data tables mem limit. John Tilling covered this change or enhancement in his foundations session on Tuesday, I think. Essentially, I doubt very much this will impact any customers in the UK and Ireland. This change relates to a particular customer who made extensive use of shared data tables, and to such an extent that they actually exhausted the amount of storage that was not the storage that was required to hold the data, the records, but actually the storage that was required to hold the control information connected to the data. They exhausted that, what was a 2 GB limit for that. So this enhancement is to move that control information to 64-bit storage within the CICS region, and by default that limit is set to 4 GB, which, given the minimum mem limit for a CICS region now is 10 GB, that 4 GB, if it was ever used, would be 40% of what's available. I think advice for most customers is you can safely ignore this parameter, allow it to default. Certainly if you're not using shared data tables, it's not relevant at all. Okay, I'm going to pause for a second.
No questions?
So probably worth spending a wee bit more time on this particular change. If you were in Lewis's session yesterday, he described a new storage protection capability in CICS 6.1 called instruction execution protection. this is a way of protecting data storage in CICS from being executed. So effectively preventing, so storage that is intended to be used for data should not contain executable code, and this is to close potential malicious exploits, buffer overruns, or accidental storage violations which result in code being executed that shouldn't be executed. So that's the background. However, from that execution protection is disabled by default, and we'll get on to how you enable it in a later slide. But a kind of knock-on effect of this new protection capability is that 4 new DSAs have had to be created. So this is to enable programs that need to execute to be loaded into storage that is not protected from not being executed. So from a migration point of view, what do these new DSAs actually mean? Well, first of all, there's 4 new SIP parameters, which all default to 0. So no change there really from what you do with existing DSAs. We still recommend you do not specify sizes for individual DSAs unless you've got a specific need to do so. So continue to specify DSA limit and EDSA limit and allow CICS to manage the makeup of that storage underneath. So that bit doesn't change. Also, this new capability won't impact the amount of storage each task actually uses. However, it will potentially impact how that storage is distributed across different DSAs. And because of the way DSAs are allocated in terms of extents, the knock-on effect of this might be, probably will be, is your DSA and EDSA requirement might increase slightly. The DSA size for 24-bit storage is 256K. The DSA extent size for 31-bit storage is 1 megabytes. So if you end up needing an extra DSA extent, you get some idea of what your overall requirement might increase by. Hand in hand with this, the extended trusted DSA, the ET DSA, which has been around for a few releases but never really been properly used, that's been removed. So that will mitigate against the 31-bit effect of this change. So effectively there's 1 extra 31-bit DSA and there's 2 extra 24-bit DSAs. But to try and illustrate how these new DSAs will be used, let's just think about for a second programs and where they're loaded, because this will be the main use of these new DSAs. So if we look at these top 2 rows, the top 2 rows are for reentrant programs. Now, I hope the vast majority of certainly CICS application programs will be reentrant. So there's no change there. Those reentrant programs will continue to be loaded into the read-only DSAs in either 24 or 31-bit storage. And those DSAs are now, once you enable IEP, those DSAs will be kind of unprotected. So you can still execute code in those DSAs as you would expect. So where the change really comes is for non-reentrant programs. Now, you might not have any application non-reentrant programs. That's all well and good. However, there are non-reentrant programs loaded by CICS itself, by LE, or they may be get-mained by CICS and LE. So CICS and LE, I know, do have executable storage that will not lie in the read-only DSAs. So you will see some use of these new DSAs, if not by your applications, but certainly by CICS and by LE. So when you're monitoring your DSA and EDSA limits, please keep an eye on any changes you might see, especially if you're close to the limit of either DSA or EDSA. This kind of subtle change might if you're running close to the limit, might just knock you over the edge. So recommendation here is, as part of your 6.1 migration, is ensure you're monitoring, to do some kind of workload test to see what the effect is on your EDSA and DSA allocations. I'll just pause there in case there's any questions.
No, there isn't.
Okay, thanks. Just check I didn't miss anything else on this. Okay. So moving on, a change to the CPSM con SIP parameter. There's a new option at 6.1, which was also made available at 5.6, SMS-SJ. So this is only relevant if you're not using CPSM, but you are defining individual CICS regions as systems management single servers, SMSSS. So it's a way of getting, for example, connecting the CICS Explorer to a single region without needing a full CPSM implementation. CMCI, which is the API, CPSM API used by the Explorer, has been enhanced with some new capabilities which actually require a JVM to execute at the CICS end of things. So the CPSM WUI was enhanced at 5.6, sorry, I can't remember, it might have been before 5.6, to support a Liberty JVM to provide this enhanced capability. Those enhancements include grouping aggregation support, multi-factor authentication, the new bundled deployment API, and a new capability CSD map. So that all requires this a JVM to be running at the CICS end of things. And that was previously only supported with a CPSM implementation, is now also supported with the systems management single server option. And that is enabled via this new parameter option, SMS-SJ.
Steve, there is a question on the EDSA, EPDSA.
Yeah,
on the previous slide.
Jenny,
Can you?
I'll just read that now, so bear with me. I'll read it. Okay, thanks, Jiva. So Jiva's asking whether he's making the point that programs which were in 5.4, which were loaded into the ES DSA and the EC DSA at 6.1 are now loaded into the EPU DSA and EP. So that is correct. The question is there any circumstances under which EC DSA and ES DSA are still used? So those DSAs are still used, but not for executable code. So they're still used, but so EC DSA is still used for CICS control blocks. ES DSA is still used for shared storage, so get main shared, for example. But no programs will be loaded into those DSAs anymore. Hope that answered the question, Jiva, but just put a supplementary question in the chat if it didn't. And finally, on SIP parameters, DTR program, bit of comic relief. DTR program has been enhanced with a new option called None, And this is to make it consistent with the dynamic start program SIP parameter, which has always had an option called none. I think a customer wasn't paying too close attention to the difference in the syntax and specified DTR program equals none, and was surprised to find that CICS tried to invoke a program called none as a result. So this change kind of makes these two parameters consistent and a bit more sensible, I think. Right, that's the end of the SIP parameter section. I'll just pause for a second. Thanks, Jiva, for confirming
that. There is a question about SDT mem limit.
Yeah. So question is, do we need to specify a lower value for SDT mem limit, or can we live with the default value of 4 gig? I'm not sure you can specify. I need to, Jenny, maybe you could check. I don't think it's possible to specify a lower value. I think 4 gig, as well as being the default, is also the minimum. And no, you don't need to change that. That 4 gig is never actually allocated unless it's used. So I think you're safe to stick with the 4 gig. And as I say, Jenny will confirm, I don't think you could reduce it in any case. Okay. You can just answer in the chat, Jenny. So we'll move on to changes to feature toggles. So just a reminder of what a feature toggle is. So this feature toggles were created to allow a way of CICS development, introducing new capability, but allowing customers to choose if or when they adopt that new capability. So the kind of natural life cycle for a feature toggle would be the CICS development makes the feature toggle available, but kind of sets the default to be false or disabled. So whatever the feature is would have to be actively enabled by the customers who wanted to take advantage of it. If that capability proves itself, then at some point in a later release, the default would change from disabled to enabled. So by default, customers would start to adopt the new capability. And assuming success, the feature toggle would eventually be removed, and that capability would be baked in either via a SIP parameter or just enabled across the board. So the way feature toggles are specified has also changed. You can specify feature toggle to be common across all regions or specific to a particular region. And the way you do that is under the USS config directory, you have a file called feature toggles.properties. The feature toggles in that file apply to all regions that use that USS config directory. If you want region-specific feature toggles, have a subdirectory underneath USS config named after the CICS region Apple ID, and you can put region-specific feature toggles there. So that replaces the previous way of doing it, which was via a group feature toggles properties file. So the first feature toggle change at 6.1 has been the removal of the container hash feature toggle. This was related to a performance improvement introduced at CICS TS5.5, which introduced a hash table so that CICS could improve the performance in retrieving containers, especially there was a lot of containers in a channel. So rather than searching through a list, the user now uses a hash table. The kind of side effect is this is if any customers were expecting containers to be returned in a particular order if they were browsing through the containers in a channel using the getNext container channel. The order the containers are returned can no longer be is no longer consistent with the hash table. It was never documented that it would be consistent, but customers may have come to expect a certain behavior prior to 5.5. Hence the feature toggle to switch this new hashing behavior off if it caused a problem. However, that feature toggle is now removed at 6.1. So if you are skipping 5.5 and 5.6, as I know some of you are, just check if you're using the getNext container command in your applications, and check that those applications are not expecting containers to be returned in a particular order. The next feature toggle is a BAS, CPSM BAS large KICS. I can't believe this will apply to any UK and Ireland customers. There was one particular customer who made such extensive use of BAS that they exhausted the data space storage required to install a large resource deployment list to a single KICS. So this new feature toggle enables CPSM BAS to use multiple data space storage for such resource lists if it's required. The default is 6.1 is false, so we don't expect most, if any, customers will need this. So the next feature toggle, WLM, bottom region status update threshold. This only applies to customers who are using CPSM Sysplex optimized workload routing. And it's only really relevant if you notice, if you have Sysplex optimized workload routing and you notice you're getting a lot of coupling facility activity in regions that are not doing very much, typically non-production regions. This is behavior that was noticed at one particular customer where a bunch of development regions with a max task of a certain amount were spending a lot of time updating the coupling facility. Effectively, the way this threshold works is if you fall below this threshold, which is specified as a percentage of max task, then for each task which is attached and detached, the region status server in the coupling facility will be updated to reflect the change in task count until you reach that threshold. So in the case where regions were permanently below that threshold, they were updating the coupling facility each time a task was attached and detached. So this new feature toggle enables you to stop those coupling facility updates if you're in that situation by setting this parameter to false. Another CPSM Sysplex optimized workload routing related feature toggle. This one's called Search Resist. I would ignore the name. It's not really a helpful name, I don't think. All I'll say about this one is CPSM workload management was enhanced in 6.1, and I'll put enhanced in quotes, so that routing to target regions would favour local regions on the same LPAR where appropriate, and that is what you'd expect. If you don't want that behaviour, there is still the link neutral algorithms which enable a more even spread across target regions on different LPARs. This feature toggle was only introduced because a particular customer wanted particular behavior, and I'll suffice to say the recommendation is to leave this feature, don't specify this feature toggle or leave it at false in order to benefit from the expected behavior of CPSM workload management. I think I'll leave it at that. How are we doing? Right. Another feature toggle, free USS processes. This feature toggle has been removed at 6.1. It didn't exist at 5.4, and it relates to a change in the way CICS frees USS processes which are associated with OpenTCBs. At 5.4, these processes were not freed at end of task. They were available to be reused. At 6.1, they are freed at end of task unless you have the IP CICS sockets capability enabled in the region. IP CICS sockets is the one workload which does benefit from reusing USS processes. So if you have that active, the USS processes will not be freed at task end. There was a bit of a situation at 5 and 5.6 with certain customers who were not getting the behavior they wanted, and rather spend time going into that. I think we'll just leave it at that. The feature toggle was there to enable customers to change the behavior depending on what workload was running in the region. But as I say, in 6.1, CICS has taken care of that itself and will determine what is the best behavior. Hence, the feature toggle is no longer needed. So I'll. Okay, Jiva, I see you've got a question. I think I'll come back to that question, Jiva. I'll try and get through to the end of this section first. So just to return briefly to instruction execution protection, I mentioned it was available but disabled by default in 6.1. This is how you would enable it via the this feature toggle. And a couple of other extra things to point out here. The IP is a hardware function, so it is only available on Z14 or higher hardware. And in CICS 6.1, it does prereq a couple, an LE PTF. So the APAR number is there, PH39134. I recommend you check if that APAR is applied to your system or not, because it does change the behavior of LE inside CICS. If that APAR is not applied, LE will be doing get mains for let me think about this. LE will be get maining storage and then executing code within that storage. Once you have that APAR applied, it will use the get main executable command to get that storage, and so therefore will support instruction execution protection. But if you don't have that APAR applied, it won't be get maining executable storage, and will therefore continue to get that storage inside the existing DSAs. So the point here is once that APAR is applied, it will change the behavior of LE inside CICS and where it gets, which DSA it uses for some of its storage. So it is worth checking if you're upgrading if that APAR is applied. I think ideally you would want it to be applied so that when you go to 6.1, the LE behavior is consistent going forward. If you upgrade to 6.1 and subsequently apply that APAR, the LE behavior will change at some point after you've upgraded to 6.1. So probably best to get that change in at the same time as you upgrade. Okay. And the final feature toggle is the default cipher file. Jenny did a good job of explaining what this one does the other day. But essentially, the applications which use the web open or invoke service commands but do not specify a cipher, that there is a ciphers parameter on these commands. In those cases, unless you're using TLS 1.3, CICS will use a kind of hard-coded default list of 2-digit ciphers. This feature toggle enables you to instead specify that the default ciphers file provided with CICS can be used instead. Okay. So let me pause. I'll just read Jiva's question. What is considered extremely high frequency? So Jiva, I suggest we take this one offline. My brief answer is there is no benefit to you in Search Assist. Do not enable it. In fact, there's a bit of I know which company you work for. There's a bit of a history there. So let's take that one offline. Okay, rapidly running out of time. So what I'll do is I'll finish this section on resource definitions quickly, and then I'll pause for questions. So in terms of resource definitions, there's a new resource attribute on the DB2 entry called share locks. John Telling talked about the diamond deadlock problem on Tuesday and how it's been solved with DB2 shared locks and the use of XIDs. How you enable that function is via the SIP parameter, share locks. Sorry, not SIP parameter, or the attribute on the DB2 entry, and that replaces a feature toggle which was introduced in 5.5 and 5.6 to enable this capability. The TCP/IP service, URI map, and IPCon definitions have all been changed in that the ciphers attribute, which previously allowed either the old way, the hex string, or the new way, the XML file. From 6.1, the hex string option has been deprecated. So strong encouragement to stop all use of 2-digit ciphers inside CICS. The behavior is noted here on the right. If ciphers already contains a file name, there's no change, you're in a good place. If ciphers is not specified, it will now default to the default ciphers XML file. And if it does contain the numeric values, although that is deprecated, it will still be honoured, but a warning will be issued if you're on max TLS 1.2 or lower. And if you're on TLS 1.3, that is not supported and the install will fail. And finally, on resources, the URI map has been enhanced. Previously, we did not allow a URI map, 2 URI maps with the same host port and path to be installed in the same CICS region. That restriction has been removed. You can now specify multiple URI maps specifying the same host port and path, and that enables you to have different security, for example, have different security attributes associated with the same external service, which allows different programs to invoke that service with different security settings. Okay, given the time, I think I'll just probably best to stop there. I'm not going to go, as I say, these slides are available in the GSE website. Let's pause on this final CICS externals slide. We've only really talked about SIP parameters, feature toggles and resource definitions. When you're upgrading, there's a whole host of other things you should review. The CICS API commands, check for changes there. I should have pointed out at the beginning that the CICS documentation has been significantly enhanced recently, certainly in the 5.6.6.1 timeframe. Makes it a lot clearer what the changes are in different areas between all supported releases. So you'll see the 6.1, it's no longer called the Knowledge Centre, it's just now called the IBM Doc, I think. Will does a really good job of breaking down what the changes are and what release they were introduced at. So depending on what release you're coming from, you can see which changes impact you. And in addition to what we've covered today, it covers the API commands. The advice for exits and URMs remains the same. You might make sure you review and reassemble those. Same for macro control tables. Probably the MCT is the only one left, which needs to be considered, but make sure you reassemble it. There'll be a host of new statistics and monitoring data. That's an area of focus for CICS releases for some time now. So there is more monitoring data, there is more statistics made available with each new release to give you greater insights into what is happening inside the CICS region. So make sure you review what those changes are. And also the SPI commands, there'll be changes there, certainly in line with the SIT parameter changes and some other changes as well. So make sure you review what all the changes are and how that might impact any in-house routines or automation or monitoring and statistics, etc. And I'll just finish. I'm not going to go through the whole upgrade process, other than to just look at these bullet points. The order of these bullet points. I mean, ideally, it would be great if you could upgrade CICS, everything in one go. Upgrade all the regions, CPSM, all the data sharing servers, the Explorer. Upgrade everything at the same time. That would be ideal. However, you probably want to maintain availability during a CICS upgrade. So the order you upgrade things in becomes important to maintain that availability. And the order listed here is probably the way you want to do it. You can do the CICS Explorer first, since the Explorer, the latest Explorer, is backwards compatible with previous supported CICS releases. You need to do the LPA, the linked list, the APF authorization changes on an LPAR before you would consider upgrading anything else. The data sharing servers, so that's temporary storage servers, the shared data tables, etc. They can be upgraded in advance of the CICS regions which use them. So either upgrade them at the same time as the regions that use them, or you can upgrade before the CICS regions that use them. CPSM is a big topic on its own in terms of upgrade. There's certain rules about how you upgrade CPSM, which is detailed in the files in this deck. Essentially, make sure you upgrade the CMAS maintenance point first, then perhaps the other CMASs, and finally make sure you upgrade the agent code in each MAS at the same time as the CMAS to which it connects. And finally, you can upgrade the CICS regions. So I'm out of time, unfortunately. So I'll just pause in case there's any final questions. When will the deck be available? The deck's already available. If you go to the GSE website, you can download it now. Okay, I'll hand back to you, Rob or Jenny.
Hi, Steve. Thank you so much for that. I know there's an awful lot of content in there, and probably an awful lot of interest from everyone. I think CICS 6.1 is going to be one of those releases that everyone gravitates to. We'll look forward to seeing the stats later on. thank you very much, everyone. I've posted the feedback link in the chat. If you could give some feedback on this one, as Steve says, the foils are there. If anyone wants to discuss 6.1 upgrades, you've got a community out there. You can get in touch with me or any of the folks from IBM. I know Steve coordinates everything for the UK. So we're, I don't know, halfway through the experience at the moment. It's been a very positive one so far. We're back again later on with at 12 noon with an enormously long titled session, but it's automated integration and continuous testing is the only bit I've written down, from Will Yates, who's apparently got a very heavy cold and come off his deathbed to do the presentation. Will's an excellent presenter, so I encourage you all to come along to that one. And thanks again, Steve. Very informative. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers now. Bye, folks.